Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you all here today. Well, in recent weeks, we've been talking about the Platform Sutra, the teachings of Wei Ning. And the last couple times, he's been trying to clarify the meaning to help us understand the meaning of Prajnaparamita. And this next section, he still goes on about talking about what is prajnaparamita, perfect wisdom or wisdom beyond wisdom. And you might wonder, well, why spend so much time and effort on this one term? Prajnaparamita is really central to the tradition of Mahayana Buddhism, the great vehicle Buddhism. Those of you who may be familiar with the Heart Sutra will recall the section where it talks about a bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all topsy-turvy views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on prajnaparamita and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. So this prajnaparamita, whatever it is, seems to be pretty central. So I'll read the next, or portions of the next little section as Wei Ning tries to talk about prajnaparamita. Good friends, if you wish to enter the Dharma realm of the deep mind, the samadhi of prajna, you only need to practice the practice of prajnaparamita. So what is that? Well, he says, this is the teaching of the supreme vehicle, which is spoken on behalf of those with great capacity for the highest wisdom. It isn't the wisdom of prajna that's great or small. It's because all these beings have deluded themselves into looking for a Buddha through external practices and haven't yet realized their own nature, that they remain people of small capacity. And yet, on hearing the direct teaching, if they depend not on external practices, but simply on their own minds, and they let their own nature give rise to right views, even all these beings with their mistaken views, their passions, and their afflictions will suddenly wake up. And like the ocean that takes in all rivers, the great and the small, and combines them into one, they will see their nature and not dwell on the outside or inside. Wei Ning he uses a metaphor here or a simile that's kind of a little confusing potentially. He says, in trying to distinguish how different people respond to this teaching, he says it's like when the great dragon sends down a heavy rain and it rains on Jambudvita, which is like the Indian subcontinent, until its towns and villages are all swept away like leaves in a stream. But if the same rain falls on the ocean, it is unaffected. So these teachings, he's trying to emphasize how, some people may get it, other people may not at that time, although he thinks everyone has the capability of receiving these teachings and practicing prajnaparamita. And as a result, they will come and go freely and be able to get rid of attachments and penetrate everything without restriction. The mind that cultivates such a practice is basically no different from the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Um, yeah, the metaphor is a little confusing about because the rain falls on the villages and sweeps the leaves and structures into the stream, kind of causes a flood, or it falls in the ocean and is unaffected. To me, that's a little confusing. I'm not sure whether we're supposed to be in the ocean or in the villages, but in any case, the core idea here seems to be that people may or may not respond to this teaching of prajnaparamita initially, but ultimately they all may do so. Well, Wei-Ning didn't come up with this prajnaparamita notion on his own, of course. And there is text from at least, you know, probably 7 or 8 centuries earlier that emphasizes the importance of prajnaparamita. And a lot of it hasn't even been translated. But there is a Prajnaparamita Sutra of 8,000 lines that has been translated, and it's immense. But we won't obviously go through all that, but there is a selection here that I think helps. I think helps clarify things. Now, the way the writing is formatted is a little confusing. There's a conversation going on between two of the Buddha's followers, Subhuti and Shariputra, and they're talking about this prajnaparamita, this wisdom beyond wisdom. But there's a third party, which is Subhuti's Buddha nature, which speaks on its own as if it's another participant in the conversation. And you'll see what I mean when we get to that part. So in this section, I'm going to start reading. Subhuti is talking. He's talking to Shariputra. Shariputra has been trying to explain this, but Subhuti is just not really understanding it. And he persists in his questioning. He says, Brother Shariputra, although you state the case eloquently, I still cannot discover any independently self-existing structures to correspond with these wonderful words, bodhisattva and prajnaparamita. My question remains, what bodhisattva should be instructed in what perfection of wisdom? What good is it to play with words if one cannot discover some reality to which they actually refer? Yeah, reasonable concern. Well, at this point, Once again, the power streaming from Subhuti directly from Buddha nature responds perfectly to this question through his own speech. So Subhuti is still talking, but he is now channeling Buddha nature. And he says, the reality which these and all other terms refer is ungraspable and inconceivable, possessing no physical or metaphysical self-existence. The spiritual aspirant who does not become even subtly anxious when this unthinkable depth of perfect wisdom is invoked should be recognized as already a bodhisattva immersed in prajnaparamita, authentically established in truth, by being free from any personal claim to truth. The adamantine awareness, who flows as perfect wisdom, does not define, formulate, and thereby experience reality in terms, personal feelings, and personal consciousness. This would be the way of personality, not the way of prajnaparamita. Whoever remains crystallized as personality cannot melt and flow as the perfection of wisdom. Spontaneous and selfless flow alone is the authentic practice of prajnaparamita, while remaining a separate personality constantly attempting to grasp and to define the ungraspable and the indefinable, one can never blossom into the omniscience, which is total awakeness. Prajnaparamita never attempts to grasp or define what is. Prajnaparamita can never be grasped or defined. With selfless freedom and openness alone can the bodhisattva flow as perfect wisdom. So, so we get the sense here of the underlying teaching, which comes up recurrently in the Mahayana tradition, certainly in the Zen tradition, beyond words, wisdom beyond words, knowledge beyond words. The sense that there is a way of knowing that we can't really put into a text. Although there's a lot of text out there, and the text can be useful in pointing towards something, just as a map can be useful in getting from one place to another. But it's not the place itself. So these teachings, I think, are trying to really help us not get stuck in labels, titles, rules, and roles, to be what might be called the Zen person of no rank. So there's a story which I guess dates to at least the 19th century, a Zen story. It's probably older than that and was passed on in the oral tradition, about two monks and a woman by the river. So as the story goes, and there are all kinds of variations on this, as the story goes, this woman had earlier in the day, in order to visit a relative, had crossed this little stream, just walking across. It's a small little trickle of a stream, and and had gotten to where she wanted to go. But during the course of the day, while she was visiting, there had been a heavy rainfall, and even heavier upstream, such that the little trickling stream had turned into a, a roiling rapids of a river, and was not something that she could get back across, so that she was stuck there on one side of the river, afraid to try to get back home. And of course, she had responsibilities at home and needed to get there. So she was upset and stressed out by this situation. Anyway, there were these two monks that came along, an elder monk and a junior monk, senior monk and a junior monk. And the the senior monk, hearing her story and what she needed, picked her up and carried her across the river. And of course, the junior monk walked across the river too. And once across the river, she was set down on the other side and could get where she needed to go, get home where she needed to be. And then the monks walked along, and they had a ways to go before getting back to the monastery. But after they had walked along in silence for a few minutes, the junior monk said, "I can't believe you picked up that woman and carried her across the river. Don't you know that the precepts absolutely forbid touching women?" Of course, monastics in that tradition have 227 precepts, one of which is never touch a woman. And the senior monk then said, I set that woman down on the bank of the river, but you seem to be carrying her still." So that's a story that's often told in guidance to, how one deals with the moral precepts. But I think it also speaks to the topic of what it means to live in, to practice prajnaparamita. To approach situations with an open mind and an open heart, with curiosity and the willingness to be of benefit to the extent that one can, to play one's part. Now, I think there are, as I see it, some dangers in all of this, to sort of uh, set aside the rule book and to say that you're guided by something that is inexpressible, that is indefinable, that is beyond comprehension. Isn't there a possibility that you could just go way off track? So I think a couple provisos are in order. One is that I think this practice requires, in a way, a kind of brutal honesty, an honesty that can be, I think, cultivated with meditation practice. And I'm sure there are other ways as well, but meditation practice is, to my mind, a way of cultivating honesty. It's hard to sit there still for 30 minutes watching your mind and lie to yourself repeatedly. Possible, but ultimately, the truth will out. It it's kind of like looking in the mirror for an extended period of time. It's hard to just do that and lie to yourself. I think people who habitually lie just avoid doing such things because it's uncomfortable. So honesty is a requirement, sincerity. And also, I think it takes a certain amount of faith. Faith in this prajnaparamita, the mother of all Buddhas. A certain amount of trust in mind. Confidence. Confidence to follow that guidance, wherever it seems to come from. It's important to also, I think, remember that these teachings of prajnaparamita were uttered in a context that included the Buddha's teachings about morality, teachings about patience, about diligence, about generosity, about meditation. So these teachings were not offered in a vacuum, but within that context. So people who had been sort of bathed in these virtues were the audience that uh, Wei Neng was talking to. And also, I think it's important to just say that these teachings don't exclude rationality. I mean, um, prajnaparamita, to be guided by prajnaparamita doesn't mean to be irrational. Um, this wisdom beyond wisdom includes rationality, our reasoning mind. It's just much bigger, much larger than that. And it's not the same as just going with your gut either. Again, I think it includes your gut, but it's bigger than that. Sometimes your gut can be diluted. It requires a certain humility. And as I said, honesty and a willingness to be of benefit in whatever way one can. I find it interesting that listening to conversations about artificial intelligence and what it can do for us and what capabilities it has, and is it consciousness? Is it like us? Certainly seems to behave like us in certain ways if you're interacting with it on your computer. But I think it's important to remember that it's just, it's statistical pattern recognition. It's it's putting symbols together in ways that it has been taught. I find at least some of the discussions about artificial intelligence to be denigrating about with respect to what we are, with respect to being human, to not really appreciate the amazement, the the awesomeness of this human life and this human consciousness, and think that a machine that requires 100,000 households worth of energy in order to do anything can in any way substitute for a human being. So I don't think AI is capable of prajnaparamita. We're getting near the end of the sort of sermon part of the Platform Sutra. It'll be going into question and answers, and I'm not sure how much of that we'll pursue. But we'll stop there for today. And I would be interested in whether you find this notion or these, whatever this is, prajnaparamita, whether it resonates with you or whether it's just confusing, how you relate it to your life. One thing that is emphasized again and again about it is that it's not just a concept to carry around in your head. It actually doesn't come alive until it's actualized in your daily life. Thank you very much for listening today. And we'll go into breakout rooms and then we'll get together again later. Thank you once again.